Chosen one, let me say this clearly. If you prefer being alone over fake socializing, if small talk drains you, if forced laughter feels like betrayal, if you walk away from crowds feeling heavier than when you arrived, you are not antisocial, you are not broken, you are not awkward, you are discerning. And there's a difference. Chosen one, this message is not random. You didn't click on this by accident. There is a reason you've always felt like an observer instead of a participant. A reason you can sit alone in peace while others panic without noise. Because your spirit recognizes what your flesh cannot tolerate. You see through masks. You feel energy shifts instantly. You can tell when someone is smiling but not sincere, and pretending to enjoy it physically exhausts you. Most people socialize to escape themselves. You isolate to understand yourself. That is not weakness, that is calling. The Bible says in Proverbs 4:23, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." You took that seriously, even before you knew you were doing it. While others blend in to survive socially, you withdraw to protect spiritually. That is chosen behavior. Now listen carefully. The world rewards extroversion. It rewards performance. It rewards surface-level charm. But heaven does not choose based on volume. Heaven chooses based on depth. And depth requires separation. Before I go further, if this is already resonating with you, type "I choose depth" in the comments. Let the algorithm know this message found the right soul. And if this channel speaks to your spirit consistently, make sure you're subscribed. We are building a community of chosen ones who refuse to dilute themselves. And if you feel led to support this mission, you can use the Super Thanks feature below. It helps this message reach more people who are silently struggling with this exact identity crisis. Now let's go deeper. You don't hate people, you hate pretending. You don't avoid gatherings because you're insecure. You avoid environments where authenticity is rare. You feel the pressure to network, to vibe, to just loosen up. But something inside you resists, and that resistance is not rebellion. It's spiritual alignment. Remember this. Even Jesus withdrew. Luke 5:16 says, "But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed." Often, not occasionally. Often, if the Son of God needed solitude, what makes you think your desire for it is dysfunction? You are wired for depth, reflection, discernment, and spiritual awareness, and those things cannot grow in constant noise. The chosen are rarely crowd-powered. They are spirit-powered. You recharge in silence because that is where your clarity lives. You think clearly when you're alone because that's when external influence fades. You feel safe when there is no pressure to perform. And that alone should tell you something powerful. Your nervous system rejects fake energy. Your spirit rejects shallow connection. And your calling rejects conformity. You were never meant to master small talk. You were meant to master self-awareness. You were never meant to blend into social circles. You were meant to stand apart, even when that feels lonely. But here's the urgency. If you misunderstand your solitude, you will label yourself incorrectly. And when you mislabel yourself, you shrink. You'll try to become louder, more available, more socially acceptable. And every time you do, you'll feel drained. Because chosen ones do not thrive in constant performance. They thrive in purpose. And solitude is where purpose is clarified. So don't let the world shame you for protecting your energy. Don't let people guilt you into environments that suffocate your spirit. There is nothing wrong with preferring real over random. Nothing wrong with depth over distraction. Nothing wrong with fewer connections that are authentic, instead of many that are hollow. Chosen one, you are not isolating because you are rejected. You are separating because you are selected. Chosen one, here's what most people don't understand about you. You don't just hear words, you feel intentions. You don't just see smiles, you sense motives. And that is exactly why fake socializing exhausts you. When you walk into a room, you immediately start reading the atmosphere. You can tell who is insecure, who is competing, who is pretending, who is scanning the room for status, who is laughing too loudly, who is masking pain. Most people don't even realize they're doing it. But you do, because you're not just socially aware, you're spiritually sensitive. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians 2:15, the spiritual person judges all things. That doesn't mean you walk around criticizing people. It means your spirit discerns what your eyes can't fully explain. And discernment is heavy. When conversations are shallow, you feel it. When someone flatters you but their energy feels off, you feel it. When a group is bonded by gossip instead of growth, you feel it. And here's the truth. Most social gatherings are built on performance. People trying to look successful. People trying to look unbothered. People trying to look interesting. Very few are simply trying to be real. You, on the other hand, crave substance. You want conversations about purpose, faith, struggles, growth, healing, vision. You want truth, not trends. So when you're surrounded by surface-level energy, your system goes into overload. It's not anxiety. It's overstimulation of discernment. Your spirit is processing inconsistencies faster than your mind can articulate them. That's why you leave certain gatherings feeling drained, even if nothing bad happened. Energy was exchanged, and you felt all of it. Proverbs 27:19 says, "As water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart." You instinctively look for reflection of heart, not presentation of personality. But here's where many chosen ones get confused. You start thinking something is wrong with you because others seem fine in those environments. They laugh easily. They mingle comfortably. They don't overthink the vibe. But you're not wired like most. You are calibrated differently. God did not design you to operate on autopilot socially. He designed you to be spiritually alert. And spiritual alertness requires a certain level of separation. Think about this. Prophets in Scripture were rarely the life of the party. They were often alone, observing, listening, receiving. Jeremiah was misunderstood. Elijah felt isolated. Even David spent years in fields before he ever stood in a palace. Isolation was preparation, and discernment was their protection. Your preference for solitude is not because you lack social skill. It's because you lack tolerance for pretense. You can participate when necessary. You can speak when needed. You can be warm, kind, even charismatic. But you cannot sustain environments where authenticity is scarce, and you shouldn't have to. The problem isn't that you don't enjoy people. The problem is that you see too much. You notice the subtle envy, the passive competition, the forced validation loops, and instead of adapting to it, your spirit quietly withdraws. Because chosen ones are not meant to be entangled in unnecessary energy exchanges. You are meant to be intentional. And the more you mature spiritually, the less you crave random interaction, not because you hate humanity, but because you respect your calling. Chosen one, this is where many people misunderstand themselves. There is a difference between isolation and divine separation. Isolation is fear-driven. Divine separation is purpose-driven. Isolation says, "I'm not enough." Divine separation says, "I'm being prepared." Isolation comes from insecurity. Divine separation comes from instruction. And if you don't know which one you're walking in, you'll start fighting something that was actually designed to protect you. Let's break this down carefully. Isolation is rooted in rejection. It's when someone withdraws because they feel inferior, ashamed, anxious, or unworthy. It's when fear builds walls. It's when you hide because you don't believe you belong anywhere. But divine separation feels different. It doesn't feel like self-hatred. It feels like clarity. It doesn't feel like running. It feels like being redirected. When you choose solitude over fake socializing, ask yourself this: am I hiding or am I protecting my peace? Because chosen ones don't withdraw due to weakness. They withdraw due to awareness. Look at Moses. Before he led millions out of Egypt, he spent 40 years in the wilderness. 40 years. That wasn't punishment. That was preparation. Look at Joseph. Before the palace came the pit. Before influence came isolation. Look at Paul. After his encounter with Christ, he didn't immediately step into public ministry. He went into Arabia for a period of separation. God often separates before he elevates. And here's the key. Separation sharpens identity. When you're constantly around noise, opinions, trends, expectations, and social pressure, it becomes harder to hear your own convictions. Solitude strips that away. When you prefer being alone over fake socializing, what you're really saying is, "I refuse to lose myself for temporary acceptance." That is not isolation. That is spiritual maturity. But here's where it gets real. The enemy will try to twist divine separation into self-doubt. He'll whisper, "See, no one invites you. See, you don't belong. See, you're awkward." But what if you're not uninvited? What if you're uninterested? What if you're not excluded? What if you're selective? Chosen ones are not meant to be everywhere. Jesus had crowds, but he only had 12 close disciples. And even within the 12, he had 3 he was especially close to. Depth, not mass approval. You don't need wide access. You need aligned access. Another sign of divine separation is peace. Even if there's occasional loneliness, there is still peace. Isolation feels chaotic and heavy. Divine separation feels quiet and intentional. You might miss connection sometimes. You might desire deeper relationships. That's human. But deep down, you know you would rather wait for real than settle for fake. And that waiting period, that's sacred. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, "To everything there is a season. There are seasons of community, and there are seasons of refinement." Right now, your spirit may be in refinement mode. God may be pruning your circle so your calling can grow without distraction. Because here's the truth many won't say. Not everyone can handle your depth. Not everyone understands your silence. Not everyone deserves access to your energy. And instead of forcing connection, you chose alignment. That's growth. But you must guard your heart from turning separation into superiority. You're not better than anyone. You're just on assignment. And assignments require focus. Chosen one, let's talk about something specific. Small talk, weather updates, surface compliments, endless gossip about people who aren't even present, forced laughter at jokes that aren't funny, conversations that never go deeper than "what do you do?" For most people, that's normal. For you, it feels like slow suffocation. And you've probably asked yourself, why does this irritate me so much? Why can't I just relax and go along with it? Here's the truth. You are wired for substance. When your spirit craves meaning, surface-level conversation feels empty. It's not that you're incapable of participating. It's that your soul isn't fed by it. Jesus rarely engaged in shallow exchanges. Even when people asked simple questions, he responded with parables, depth, and spiritual insight. He redirected conversations toward transformation. Look at his encounter with the woman at the well in John 4. What started as a request for water became a revelation about living water. He took a normal interaction and elevated it into something eternal. That's your wiring. You don't just want to talk. You want to uncover. You don't just want to connect. You want to understand. And when conversations stay on the surface, your mind disengages. Your energy drops. Your spirit pulls back. Because you were not designed for endless triviality. Now be careful here. This doesn't mean every conversation must be heavy or intense. But it does mean your soul longs for authenticity. Real stories, real struggles, real dreams. Real growth. Fake socializing often runs on image management. People talking to impress. People filtering themselves to avoid judgment. People measuring their words for approval. You sense that instantly. And once you sense it, you can't unsee it. That's why you sometimes feel alone, even in a crowded room. Not because you lack social skill, but because you lack resonance. Amos 3:3 says, "Can two walk together unless they are agreed?" Agreement is not just about opinions. It's about frequency. If your spirit is tuned to growth and truth, and the room is tuned to validation and performance, you will feel the disconnect immediately. That disconnect drains you. And here's something most people won't admit. Small talk exists because vulnerability scares people. Depth requires exposure. Surface-level interaction keeps everyone safe from being seen, but chosen ones are not afraid of being seen. You're afraid of being fake. That's the difference. You would rather have one raw, honest conversation than 20 polished, empty ones. You would rather sit in silence than pretend interest in topics that don't align with your values. And silence doesn't intimidate you. It reveals you. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Stillness is where revelation happens. Noise is where distraction thrives. The world equates constant social interaction with health. But spiritual growth often requires stillness, reflection, and selective engagement. Your irritation with small talk is not arrogance. It's misalignment. But here's the caution. Don't let your preference for depth turn into impatience with people who are still learning to be authentic. Everyone is on a different stage of awareness. Your role is not to judge shallow spaces. Your role is to recognize when you don't belong in them and walk away without resentment. Chosen one, let's address something that has probably crossed your mind more than once. Why is my circle so small? You scroll through social media and see group photos, parties, events, big birthdays, constant outings, people who always seem surrounded. And then there's you, a handful of people, maybe two, maybe one, maybe none at the moment. And sometimes that thought creeps in. Is something wrong with me? No. What you call a small circle is actually a refined filter. Chosen ones are not designed for mass intimacy. You can care about many, but you connect deeply with few. Even Jesus modeled this. He had the multitudes. He had the 70. He had the 12. But within the 12, he had Peter, James, and John. Access narrowed as assignment deepened. Proximity is privilege. And not everyone can handle proximity to someone who carries depth. You require honesty, loyalty, emotional intelligence, spiritual awareness, growth mindset, accountability, and authenticity. That standard alone eliminates most casual connections. It's not that you think you're better, it's that you know what drains you, and you refuse to keep paying that price. Proverbs 13:20 says, "Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm." You don't fear being alone, you fear misalignment. You've experienced what happens when you allow the wrong energy close to you, the subtle competition, the hidden jealousy, the lack of support when you grow, the gossip masked as concern. And once you've seen that pattern, you don't unsee it. So your circle shrinks, not because you hate people, but because you respect your peace. Here's something powerful. The higher your calling, the tighter your circle. Why? Because influence attracts projection. People will project their insecurities onto you, their expectations onto you, their fears onto you. If your boundaries are weak, you'll start carrying emotional weight that was never yours. A small circle protects focus. A small circle protects clarity. A small circle protects assignment. David didn't defeat Goliath with a crowd beside him. He stepped forward alone, but he had been trained in isolation first. The world equates popularity with value, but heaven measures alignment, and alignment is rare. You don't need 10 friends who clap for you publicly but doubt you privately. You need one who prays for you when you're not in the room. And sometimes during certain seasons, that one is God alone. There will be moments when your circle feels almost non-existent. That doesn't mean you're forgotten. It means you're being refined. Refinement removes excess. Refinement removes distraction. Refinement removes dependency. You are learning how to stand spiritually independent of social validation. That's maturity. But let's balance this. Having a small circle does not mean you isolate emotionally. It does not mean you shut people out permanently. It means you are intentional. You don't give access automatically. Access must be earned through consistency, character, and alignment. And here's something many chosen ones don't realize. Your depth intimidates surface-level people. Your silence makes insecure people uncomfortable. Your boundaries expose people who rely on control. So instead of blaming yourself for the shrinking circle, consider this possibility. The filter is working. Chosen one, let's be honest. There are nights when the strength fades a little, days when the silence feels heavier than usual, moments when you see other people laughing together, traveling together, building memories together, and something inside you whispers, maybe I should just try harder to fit in. This is the part no one talks about. You can be confident in your calling and still feel lonely. You can know you're set apart and still crave companionship. Even Elijah, after calling down fire from heaven, found himself alone under a tree saying, "I have had enough." He felt isolated. He felt unseen. He thought he was the only one left standing for truth. And God responded gently. Not with rebuke, but with reassurance. Loneliness is not a sign that you are failing your assignment. It is often proof that you are carrying it faithfully. But here's the danger. If you let loneliness make decisions for you, you will lower your standards to escape it. You'll text people you've outgrown. You'll revisit environments that drained you. You'll entertain conversations that violate your peace, not because they align, but because you don't want to feel alone tonight. And that is where many chosen ones delay their next level. Because the temptation to belong is strong. God created us for connection. That desire is natural. But the enemy will use temporary loneliness to push you into permanent misalignment. Sit with that. Temporary loneliness is better than permanent compromise. David wrote in Psalm 25:16, "Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I'm lonely and afflicted." Even kings feel loneliness. Even anointed people feel the ache of being misunderstood. The difference is this: loneliness for the chosen is a classroom. It teaches you emotional independence. It teaches you to self-reflect. It teaches you to hear God more clearly without external noise. When you're alone, your identity is not reinforced by applause. It is reinforced by conviction. But you must learn to separate loneliness from abandonment. You are alone in some rooms because you don't belong in them. You are alone in some seasons because growth requires focus. And sometimes you are alone because God is building you into someone who won't need constant affirmation to stay steady. That strength is rare. But here's the hope. Loneliness is seasonal. Separation is purposeful. And alignment will eventually bring the right connections into your life. The key is patience. If you rush the process, you'll repeat old cycles. If you trust the process, you will attract people who match your depth instead of draining it. And remember this, you don't need many. You need right. Chosen one, this is where everything becomes serious. Preferring solitude is not just about personality. It's about protection, because every time you force yourself into fake environments just to feel included, you lose something. Focus, clarity, energy. And energy is currency. Whatever drains your energy delays your destiny. Let that sink in. When you consistently show up in spaces where you have to filter yourself, shrink yourself, or perform a version of yourself, your mind becomes fragmented. Part of you is present. Part of you is analyzing. Part of you is protecting. That inattention slows momentum. You cannot fully pursue your calling while constantly managing shallow dynamics. Jesus never chased crowds. Crowds chased him. And when the crowds became noise, he withdrew. Mark 1:35 says, "Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed." He protected his focus. He did not allow constant social access to dilute his assignment. Now apply that to your life. How many times have you attended something you didn't feel aligned with, and afterward you felt drained for days? How many times have you laughed externally but felt disconnected internally? How many times have you tried to explain your depth to people who prefer distraction? Every one of those moments chips away at momentum. Chosen ones require mental and spiritual clarity to operate. Your ideas come in silence. Your strategy forms in stillness. Your conviction strengthens in reflection. Fake socializing interrupts that. It pulls you into cycles of comparison, into subtle competition, into unnecessary drama. And while you're navigating that, your vision sits unattended. Nehemiah understood this principle. When he was rebuilding the wall, his enemies tried to distract him with meetings and conversations. His response in Nehemiah 6:3 was powerful. "I am doing a great work and cannot come down." That's focus. That's boundaries. That's assignment awareness. Chosen one, you are doing a great work, even if no one sees it yet, even if it's still forming internally. Every hour you protect your solitude, you are building capacity. Every time you decline fake engagement, you are preserving clarity, and clarity accelerates progress. But here's the trap. The world will make you feel like you're missing out. Fear of missing out is one of the strongest emotional pulls. You'll see events, photos, stories, celebrations, and you'll question your stillness. But what if what looks like missing out is actually being set apart? Remember Joseph. While others were living normal lives, he was in a prison cell, but that prison season positioned him for a palace. Had he been distracted trying to maintain social comfort, he would not have been ready for sudden elevation. Destiny requires preparation. Preparation requires separation. Separation requires discipline. And discipline requires understanding why you say no. You are not antisocial. You are anti-distraction. You are not withdrawn. You are intentional. The more you mature, the more selective you become. Because you realize something powerful. Access is expensive, and not everyone can afford proximity to your purpose. Chosen one, now we bring this home. Preferring to be alone over fake socializing is not your flaw. It is your filter. But here is the final lesson you must master. Solitude should refine you, not harden you. There is a thin line between discernment and defensiveness, between boundaries and bitterness, between peace and pride. And if you are not careful, what began as spiritual awareness can slowly turn into emotional isolation. Guard your heart, not just from fake people, but from becoming closed off to real ones. Hebrews 10:24-25 reminds us not to neglect meeting together, but to encourage one another. That means community still matters, alignment still matters, fellowship still matters. The key is this: quality over quantity, depth over noise, alignment over access. You are not called to withdraw from humanity completely. You are called to be selective about proximity. There will be people who match your frequency, people who value honesty, people who respect silence, people who are not intimidated by depth. But you will not find them by chasing. You will find them by staying authentic. When you embrace who you are, you stop apologizing for it. You stop forcing yourself into rooms that feel wrong. You stop over-explaining your need for space, and something shifts. Confidence replaces doubt. Peace replaces comparison. Clarity replaces confusion. You begin to understand that solitude is not emptiness. It is space, and space is where growth happens. Jesus often withdrew, but he always returned with greater clarity. That is the model. Withdraw to recharge, return to serve. Withdraw to hear God, return to execute. Withdraw to refine your vision, return to walk it out. Your solitude is not the destination, it is the strategy. But here's something powerful. When you stop tolerating fake socializing, you unconsciously raise the standard for everyone around you. Your presence becomes intentional. Your words carry weight. Your relationships become meaningful. Because you no longer speak just to fill silence. You speak with purpose, and people feel that difference. Some will misunderstand you. Some will label you distant. Some will say you've changed. You have. Growth changes you. Depth changes you. Awareness changes you. And not everyone grows at the same pace. But never let the misunderstanding of others make you betray your design. You were not created to entertain crowds. You were created to carry conviction. You were not wired for endless performance. You were wired for purpose. So the next time someone questions why you prefer being alone, don't shrink. Smile. Because you understand something they don't. Solitude is where you remember who you are. Solitude is where your strength rebuilds. Solitude is where God recalibrates your direction. And when the right people enter your life, they won't compete with your peace. They will complement it. Chosen one, if this message confirmed what you've always felt but couldn't explain, take it as confirmation. You are not antisocial. You are aligned. You are not rejected. You are reserved. And you are not alone in your solitude. You are chosen.